खुशबू इसमें भर दे, चलो जिंदगी को आसान कर दे। प्यार की खुशबू इसमें भर दे, प्यार की खुशबू इसमें भर दे। बुरे फासलों के दुश्मन बनेंगे, मिटाएंगे दूरी उन्हें जीत लेंगे। बुरे फासलों के दुश्मन बनेंगे, मिटाएंगे दूरी उन्हें जीत लेंगे। करे फैसला अब ये दुनिया बदल दे, करे फैसला अब ये दुनिया बदल दे। प्यार की खुशबू इसमें भर दे, चलो जिंदगी को आसान कर दे। प्यार की खुशबू इसमें भर दे, प्यार की खुशबू इसमें भर दे। अलग जिस्म है तो अलग जान होगी, फिर भी पहचान होगी। अलग जिस्म है तो अलग जान होगी, फिर भी पहचान होगी। इंसान है हम चमन को खबर दे, इंसान है हम चमन को खबर दे। प्यार की खुशबू इसमें भर दे, चलो जिंदगी को आसान कर दे। प्यार की खुशबू इसमें भर दे, प्यार की खुशबू इसमें भर दे। खुद को बताए अकेले नहीं है, हम जैसे प्यासे दिए और भी है। खुद को बताए अकेले नहीं है, हम जैसे प्यासे दिए और भी है। अंधेरे जहां को उजाले का कर दे, अंधेरे जहां को उजाले का कर दे। प्यार की खुशबू इसमें भर दे, चलो जिंदगी को आसान कर दे। प्यार की खुशबू इसमें भर दे, चलो जिंदगी को आसान कर दे। प्यार की खुशबू इसमें भर दे, प्यार की खुशबू इसमें भर दे। प्यार की खुशबू इसमें भर दे। प्यार की खुशबू इसमें भर दे।
It is during our darkest times that we must focus to see the light. With that thought, I welcome one and all for the webinar 4 on the webinar series 2020 presented by the College of Social Work Nirmala Niketan, Mumbai. A very good afternoon to Dr. Lidwin Dias, Principal, my colleagues at the college, our esteemed speakers, and the participants who have joined this webinar. As you all know, the theme of today's webinar is mental health concerns of individuals and families during and post COVID 19 meaningful social work interventions, wherein the speakers will deliberate on how social work professionals can facilitate individuals and families to cope and how telecounseling has emerged as a powerful mental health intervention. It is time for social work professionals, right from the students to persons who are working currently as academicians and social work practitioners, to critically think and adapt social work interventions to novel situations such as the current pandemic crisis. Dr. Lidwin Dias has been an inspiration, a guide, and leadership at the college, and it is with immense respect that I invite her to welcome the participants of the webinar and to enlighten us on the significance of today's theme for the profession, education, and its practice.
Good afternoon and welcome to the fourth webinar series on mental health concerns of individual and families in a pandemic, meaningful social work interventions. Our resource persons for this webinar are Professor Srilata Juva from TISS and Professor Gladson Xavier from Loyola College, Chennai. A very warm welcome to both of you, and we look forward to listening to your inputs on this topic. We have had 2,000 registrations for this webinar. I extend a very warm welcome to all our participants. The organizing team, Dr. Anita Machado and Dr. Smita, have conceptualized this theme and have been regularly updating the participants with the relevant information and materials related to mental health on the WhatsApp group. Dear friends, today's topic is the need of the hour, especially during this pandemic period. According to the World Health Organization, 1 in 7 individuals suffers from some form of mental health issues in India. Everyone is affected in some way or the other in all spheres of life due to the lockdown, pandemic, uncertainty of the future. The fear and panic of getting infected or being isolated and stigmatized is the concern of most. However, the reactions and feelings of each person vary, and their coping abilities in facing life's challenges differ. Every person has the strength and ability to cope with life's challenges. I came across this quote, which is very motivating. Challenges are what makes life interesting. Overcoming them is what makes life meaningful. Thus, it is important for us to face challenges and make life interesting and meaningful by overcoming them. In this pandemic situation, one may feel broken, helpless, but one needs to be strong. What is important is how you hold yourself together and keep moving with a positive attitude. Staying positive each day is what we need to cultivate and believe that each day is the best day of our life. I found another quote that I must share with you as it has a world of meaning. My dark days made me strong, or maybe I was already strong and they made me prove it. I repeat, my dark days made me strong, or maybe I was already strong and they made me prove it. Yes, my dear friends, all of us have the strength to overcome life's challenges. I'm sure the inputs from this webinar will help us to cope with our own mental health issues and also reach out to others. A special thanks to the resource persons, Professor Srilata and Professor Gladson, the organizing team, Anita and Smita, and to you all, my dear participants. I'm also grateful to Mr. Abhinandan, who has helped us with the technical expert in hosting this webinar. My best wishes to all of you. I want to end with the saying of Rabindranath Tagore. Clouds come floating into my life, no longer to carry rain or usher storm, but to add color to my sunset sky. Thank you.
I thank Dr. Ludwin for her gracious presence, her support, and the strong message that she has conveyed to all of us about the theme of the webinar. It is with deep admiration that I now introduce the esteemed speaker, Dr. Srilata Juba. Dr. Juba is a social work educator with specialization in psychiatric social work and years of teaching and clinical work experience. As part of her doctoral program, she has been trained in family therapy and clinical social work. Her areas of expertise include therapeutic intervention with individuals and families, disaster mental health, and disability. She has directed several research projects and published in peer-reviewed journals at the national and international level. And she has co-edited 3 books. Dr. Juba has been awarded the Fulbright Senior Research Fellowship for pursuing research in the area of mental health and psychosocial disabilities. Dr. Srilata has been on the board of several NGOs and on the academic board of studies of 6 universities. She was also a member group on social inclusion of the State Commission of Chhattisgarh. He is deeply interested in transforming the narratives of mental illness and disability from that of stigma being diminished to that of exercising one's full potential to lead a life of dignity and well-being. While this is her entry point, she is committed to fostering the potential of self and others towards equity and justice. She is trained in using the conscious full spectrum response approach, a transformational and ethical leadership approach based on the universal values developed and created by Dr. Monica Sharma. She is also a practitioner coach who uses this methodology to design for the results in her teaching and fieldwork. Dr. Juba currently works with the Center for Equity and Justice for Children and Families, School of Social Work, Tata Institute of Social Sciences, Mumbai. She is committed to fostering ethical leadership in people by sourcing universal values, shifting unworkable norms to generate enduring results. Dr. Srilata Juva, I welcome you to address the participants of this webinar.
Good afternoon to everybody, and thank you very much for the kind introduction, Dr. Bumblebee. And thank you to all colleagues at the College of Social Work, Nirmala Niketan, for inviting me to this special occasion, and I'm really happy to be a part of the social work fraternity. Um, as Smita had introduced, she spoke about the conscious full spectrum model, and that's what I'm going to base my presentation on. So, what is it that I deeply care about? I'm going to share my slide sets with you. So, just give me a second, please. I think I'm going to request Abhinandan or Smita to share my slides. I seem to have some problem. All right, so what is it that we deeply care about in this work? What is it that I deeply care about in this work? We'll take a minute to understand, no, to discover, to inquire within and ask ourselves, what is it that I deeply care about in this world to manifest who I truly am, who I really am? So what we're going to do is ask ourselves this question: what do I care about in this world? I'll give you an example. I care about, in 5 years from now, I care about manifesting full potential in myself and others. I care about manifesting dignity in myself and all others so that there is fairness and there is well-being for all. So take a minute to discover, to inquire within and ask yourself, what is it that you care about? Maybe half a minute since we don't have all the time. Next one. Right. So if you have inquired within, you will realize that the values that you stand for, the universal values that you stand for, what you deeply care about for yourself and others are the same values that the profession of social work stands for. We all care about dignity and worth of the person, whether it's for self or others. When I don't care about my dignity, I cannot foster dignity in another person. I cannot bring out the dignity in the other person. So therefore, it is for self and others. It's also important for us to know that we all are born with innate values of compassion, fairness, and empathy, all of which are integral to the social work profession. And therefore, when we nurture these qualities within us, we are able to manifest our professional self far more powerfully. Integrity is another value of our profession. Integrity which honors dignity, which fosters social justice, and therefore connecting with human beings and fostering human relationships are very key to our profession. They're key values that underpin our work. All these require some competency, and therefore competency is included as a value of social work even though competency is an attribute that we all acquire through the training in the profession. So when we look at what is it that we deeply care about, it is very similar to the values of the profession. And that's the beauty of social work, that we are able to bring in an alignment, a congruence between who I really am to who I am as a professional. And the beauty about social work is I can't be incongruent in my personal life and professional life. When I am congruent in my personal life and my professional life, I'm able to generate results by shifting unworkable norms that we are constantly dealing with in our work. And therefore, our work calls for an alignment of who I really am, what is the value of my profession, what systems or norms or cultural norms do I want to shift so that I generate a result which is well-being, harmony, and all the other values that you stand for people and planet. The next slide, please. Since we're talking about COVID-19, I just thought I'll share some data about COVID-19. We all know that there is enough literature to tell us that the mental health consequences of COVID-19 are rising. About 80%, more than 80% of people are, in a study of over 655 people, an online survey, Roy et al. Found that there are over 80% of people preoccupied with thoughts of COVID. And that's not a very healthy thing to do, because in times of stress, it's important to manage ourselves. So this only means that when we feel that we all need to use gloves and sanitizers all the time, we need to use these masks, which are actually personal protective equipment all the time. We experience sleep difficulties, or we have a paranoia or suspicion about or fear about acquiring the COVID-19 infection. There's nothing wrong with the fear, but when the fear is unfounded, that's when we need to start worrying. If I'm exposed to people who are positive, then it's important for me to be careful, not really operate from a sense of fear and panic. Okay? Distress related to all the material that we consume from the social media. And therefore, the study shows that over 80% of people need mental health care. The next slide, please. So, what is it that we need to do with regard to what else does the data show? The data shows that when people do not have enough supplies to sustain themselves through the lockdown period, they were the ones who were most affected. So socioeconomic status plays a very important role and influences stress, anxiety, and depression. Students and healthcare professionals experience more stress, anxiety, and depression than others. Never mind that people are able to deal with it, but the fact is they do experience stress. Okay, like I mentioned earlier, socioeconomic, socio-demographic variables play a very important role. Social support and self-efficacy are very important to see whether healthcare professionals can deal with the pandemic or not. Yeah, and there's also an increasing evidence that COVID-19 can be an independent risk factor for stress amongst healthcare professionals, particularly considering the fact that we are dealing with competing commitments. Besides the competing commitments, dealing with perhaps seemingly or perhaps really non-compliant people, and also people and the widespread stigma and exclusion that they experience in all spheres of life in the current pandemic situation. A recent study of the Indian Psychiatric Society shows that there's a 20% increase in mental illness. And that's also associated with substance abuse, and people with substance who have withdrawal symptoms from alcohol and other substances are posing a huge concern for mental health professionals. We are aware about the recent incident in Kerala, where the alcohol shops were closed, and the number of deaths due to withdrawals were higher than the number of deaths due to the COVID-19 epidemic. Can we go to the next slide, please? So therefore, Chitranjan and Rade says that people who are experiencing, you will find a greater number of incidents of mental illness in the coming months. And also, for those who already have an existing mental illness or a vulnerability, they're likely to exacerbate symptoms worsen, and perhaps for those who are in the process of recovery, they might just relapse. And therefore, and this can lead to people to consume, can lead people to consume illicit substances. And that's something that we really need to be worried about. In a recent review of literature that Ravi Raj Kumar did, he found that 18 to 28% of people have anxiety and depressive symptoms, while 8% reported stress. It's a self-reporting. So what is it that we go through during quarantine? When there is an increase in loneliness, particularly because we're going to be cut off from people, or the other way around, we are not able to maintain the work-life balance that we had in the past when we had clear demarcated spaces and time for work and for home. And that can lead to anxiety, depression, insomnia, sometimes substance abuse, and also self-harm and suicidal behavior. Now, this is an alarming concern that we need to pay attention to. We are aware that there's an increase in domestic violence as per the NCW report. And this is a huge concern because of the kind of spaces that we live in. We don't have the luxury of going to work and coming back, or we don't have space, the me time that perhaps was actually a savior for some women. And in the absence of that me time, and in the absence of continuous and constant exposure to abuse, there is a likelihood of violence increasing and exacerbating, and not just for women, but also for children. So therefore, what happens is that the change in routines, the disruption in routines has an influence on families that can take the turn for the worse. We are aware about the Childline data, which says that there has been an increase in distress calls, 92,000 calls a month, 30% of which are related to domestic violence. Child pornography is the highest internet search post-lockdown, and I wonder what we are doing to ourselves. Here we are saying that we care about others, and here we are abusing children and looking for things that actually don't help us. Now, these are unhelpful practices that actually do not permit us to cope in a healthy manner. So because of the disruption in routines, particularly for children, there is a tendency for children to experience clinging behavior, which parents perhaps may not understand. For couples that are already in a troublesome relationship, for it to worsen or exacerbate. Family dynamics that were hitherto invisible or that was managed because of the spaces that people had are now becoming visible, and therefore these become issues that we need to address. They also become issues that people may not be sure or comfortable to articulate. So how are we as social work professionals going to elicit information pertaining to all of this? Can we keep our eyes and ears open so that we elicit this information? The next slide, please. Take about 15 seconds to read this slide. When I first read this slide, I read it as our mental state right now is such that coronavirus is also being read as coronavirus. And I said something is wrong here. When I read it again, I realized how much this word has psyched us. So this is not to, this is not a joke on carnivores. This is not a joke on anything else, but it's just to see, just to illustrate how much we are preoccupied with the coronavirus, given the fact that we are bombarded with information constantly about coronavirus. The next slide, please. While we are actually looking at data that shows us, there are a lot of other factors that are not visible just now. What are the interdependencies that we have in our lives? How are we not only interdependent, but what are the intersectionalities that actually cause more distress? For example, how am I as a woman interdependent on, for example, grocery to be made available? Not all of us are fortunate, like perhaps I am, to have grocery and vegetables delivered at my doorstep. Some of us have to risk going out, getting our grocery and coming back. Not all of us have the luxury of buying our grocery at one stretch. We perhaps live on a day-to-day aspect, and therefore we need to be able to, how are we going to deal with the money, the financial difficulties that we experience? So I want to highlight a couple of groups that we need to be sensitive to, so that we are able to look at what these groups go through, and how can we be mindful and respond in an effective manner. Frontline workers or health workers and their families. We all know of instances where young children of healthcare workers complain that their parents are not available to be with them. We are aware of how young children of healthcare workers are not permitted to bond with them. That's quarantine. And imagine the kind of toll it can take on the person. I've seen young children parentifying, engaging in parentification behaviors just so that they allay the anxiety in parents. And children can pick up parents' anxiety, isn't it? So they parentify children so that they are calm. My niece tells me, I didn't want to tell you that my head is aching because you will be stressed. Now look at the parentification behavior here. It's not for her to control the pain or not talk about the pain, but then she does it. Now imagine instances of people who don't even have that kind of space. So we're going to talk about young children who are unable to articulate, who are able to articulate, who engage in parentification behaviors. Women who have to deal with competing commitments, who have to deal with abuse, who have to deal with all kinds of bullying and ridiculing at home, with little support from family members. Imagine the plight of women who are constantly abused and yet cannot open their mouths, do not have the me time that they could have done with. Migrant workers, we've heard stories of how migrant workers are being bleached, the number of deaths that we have seen in migrant workers because they had to walk all the way to their hometowns, long distances, with little support from all of us. Okay, groups such as persons with disabilities and their families, particularly where there is a problem or there's a limitation with regard to access to treatment services, whether it's physiotherapy, whether it's information, whether it is care, whether it's ration or food supply, whatever it is. Yeah. People from the LGBTQ community who are also being excluded and marginalized and stigmatized. Single parents who have to deal with all of this on their own, particularly the lockdown and its consequences. So these are the issues that we are contending with. And whether it's demography, whether it is cultural norms, whether it is patriarchy, whether it is caste class issues, all of these play an important role in understanding intersectionalities. Why is it that we had to have two men being lynched by the police? This is not to say that the police are bad. This is just to say, why is it that we can't cooperate with norms, or why is it that we have to find only aggression and violence as the only way of, dealing with people. Okay, so these are things that we need to understand, elicit, and work on. The next slide, please. So how do we relate to stress? Because any pandemic creates stress in us, and it is normal to experience stress. For those of us who are familiar with trauma literature, I just wanted to talk about the small t and the big T. Small t could be everyday hassle, stressful events, whether it's fear of being infected, whether it's fear of losing a job, or having to deal with multiple commitments, having to work from home, rising financial expenditure because of internet and electricity bills, having to manage classes of children and our own work, all of these, or whether it's traumatic stress, which are stress due to events that are beyond our capacity to cope, that actually leads to helplessness. Stress that leads to problems that we face because it is beyond our capacity to cope, and it affects our ability to deal with the current reality. In the small t, we need to mobilize internal and external resources, and therefore we could do with some help. Whereas in big T trauma or stress, we need to seek help. We need to seek professional help, particularly in a context where professional services are far and few between. Next slide, please. So therefore, when we experience stress, how do we experience stress? We experience stress in our body, the way our body reacts to stress, in our feelings, which is our emotional states, which we perceive, in the way we relate to stress. If you watch this beautiful TED Talk by Kelly McGonigal titled Making Stress My Friend, we will see how Kelly talks about how the way we relate to stress is how we respond to stress. What is our relationship with the stress? If I consider that this is a bad thing to happen to me, then my body reacts by saying, my heart beating fast, I sweat, I have palpitations, all of that. Then I tell myself this is not okay, this is not good. So then I develop a negative relationship, and the same hormone causes me to get into a state of fear. And then I say that stress is bad for me. However, literature shows, neuroscience shows that the same hormone which causes us stress, which is the oxytocin, is also the cuddle hormone. The hormone which enables us to seek support, to connect with others. So therefore, if we look at stress as an opportunity to connect with others, it is an inbuilt mechanism for stress resilience. We build resilience. If we look at stress as a way of helping ourselves or helping others, then we create the biology of courage. How do we relate to stress is what determines our response to stress. What we give attention to grows. If I give attention to the fact that stress is helpful to me, and here is yes, I'm not okay with the stress. I'm not saying be happy with the stress. Please, experiencing stress is a call for us to be in action. So can we identify symptoms of stress and be in action? This is particularly for small t stress. Okay. How do I move from not being in action, from being in fear to being in action, either offering support or seeking support, so that I connect with people? And therefore, when I do more of this connection, more of reaching out, I'm able to deal with my stress better. I can cope with my stress better. However, we know that mere coping is not adequate for us to manifest our true purpose. To be effective in who we are, I first need to notice my stress. I need to first still myself. So I will move to the next slide, please. So we're going to talk about ways of coping and ways to get into from moving from coping to resilience. The first thing I need to do is to practice stillness. Only when I practice stillness can I notice the gaps in my behavior. It is the same logic as the space between two words. Unless there is space between two words, I can't make sense of the words, right? It's the same thing. So only when I notice stillness can I notice gaps in my behavior. When I notice gaps in my behavior, I'm able to see what my stress response is. I'm able to notice how I react. When I notice how I react, I'm able to identify and name what I am stressed about. So, for example, let us say I'm stressed about this presentation. And I don't realize that I'm stressed about this presentation. So I practice stillness, I calm myself down, I center myself, and then I notice that, I'm just psyching myself up with regard to this presentation. So I ask myself, I can see my body, I can see my heart pounding fast, I can see my muscles tensing or tightening, and then I notice and I tell myself, is this really what is happening? I mean, is this the right way? Is this what I want to be? I ask myself and I say, yes, I'm afraid. Then when I name the fact that I'm afraid, I ask myself, I discern. I'm able to notice what is missing. I'm able to see reality as it really is. And then I'm able to make a decision in terms of what to do. I'm able to discern and see, well, it's okay for my body to say that I need to perform well. This is not bad. This is good anxiety. This is healthy for me. This kicks in my hormones to say, my stress hormones to say, I need to be mindful of what I'm saying. I need to constantly practice stillness so that I say the right thing. And therefore, I discern that it may have happened in the past that I did mess up. I don't have to mess it up now. So what do? I seek the support of people. I seek the support of my own internal resources, and I be in action, which is I rehearse, I practice, I seek help, and then I implement the action. So this may seem like it's a very simple way of doing things. These are deceptively simple steps. Unless I practice them and unless I notice them in the moment, I will not be able to deal with the stress. The next slide, please. So as social workers, before I go to this slide, I want to say, what is it that we will do as social workers when we are connecting with people? Typically at this point, I'm not going to talk about the various methods of social work, but I'm going to talk about what are we going to do to ourselves and our families, particularly given that we're going to be engaging in long distance interventions. How are we going to be mindful about ourselves and about asking the right questions, engaging in a manner that creates comfort and authenticity and warmth in the relationship so that we create space for the others to open up and talk to us. Unless I take care of myself, I will not be able to take care of others. So therefore, how am I going to connect with what I care about? If I care about dignity, and if the values of the profession talk about dignity, how am I going to manifest dignity? How am I going to manifest integrity, authenticity? And how am I going to manifest social justice and service in my actions? So the most important thing is to ground myself in the values of who I am, my universal values and the values of the profession, so that I create a field for all of us to be on the same page. This is the space where all of us are equal. There is no hierarchy in this space. It's also important for me as a social worker to see what are those unworkable norms in my family or in the family of the clients that I work with, in the community and in the group and in structures that needs to change and challenge them. Recently, I heard a colleague share that during the period of lockdown or during the period of COVID-19, there was sand mining going on in her village. She thought that because the Tehsildar would be very busy taking care of COVID-related activities, she thought, if I talk about sand mining and if I complain, I'm such a small fry, I will not be able to deal with things. I will not be able to deal with the aftermath. But she said, you know what? I stand for courage. I care about people. I need to tell the Tehsildar about this. She called up the Tehsildar and there was action and there was redressal. So can I call out what's not working in a manner strategically so that I generate action, not in a rah-rah kind of a manner, but in a manner that is strategic where I empower myself and my client so that we can challenge together these unworkable norms. One of the best things that we can do as social workers is to listen to our clients, and therefore that's a beautiful connection we make, and that merely listening to the other person helps alleviate stress, fosters coping in self and the other person. Okay. While the essential tips that you have read are not exhaustive, these are only some tips that we can talk about. I'm going to quickly run through them for want of time. So we find ways to contribute meaningfully. We listen to each other's feelings. We are aware of anger and triggers in ourselves, help clients identify them, and deal with them in the here and now rather than operate from the past. We celebrate the ways in which we have helped our clients and how our clients have helped each other. We don't take insults to hearts, because when someone is insulting me, it's about the other and not about me. Remember what Eleanor Roosevelt said? Nobody has the right to insult me, to make me feel inferior without my consent. Develop new hobbies. So that's all about renewing and refreshing yourself. Spend some fun time with family. So, and where, such fun time is not possible, let's discover new ways of spending time with ourselves. The next slide, please. I want to talk about how do I move from what do I choose to be in COVID times? I have a choice to be fearful. I also have a choice to move from the fear zone to the giving zone. This diagram is adapted by a colleague and I in order to suit this particular, to suit our presentation. So when I'm in a fear zone, I panic about everything. I constantly consume information about COVID. I'm scared of being infected. I get irritated easily. I act like a victim and I hoard. I panic buy. And because we can't remain in the fear zone for long, we move to the learning zone where we are open enough to understand what is it that I'm not doing. I ask myself, am I doing the right thing? I ask myself that, so therefore I stop consuming news that is harmful to me. I start to let go of being in control all the time. I begin to find ways of, making myself useful. And I recognize that people are doing the best in this current complicated situation. Okay. And I start looking for opportunities where I can reclaim myself. Then I move to the growth zone where I not only think about myself, but I also begin to think about others. I begin to calm myself and take care of myself. I practice physical distancing. I begin to practice safe hygiene practices for myself. I live in the now with a clear picture of what's going to happen next. I realize that, this is not a wait and watch game. And however, I need to be in the present moment. I rediscover my hobbies, and I'm appreciative and grateful for what I have. However, being in the growth zone is also limiting, because there's nothing wrong with the growth zone, but the growth zone does not make me stretch beyond my comfort zone like we do the yoga stretches. I'm not stretching myself so that I grow beyond my comfort zone. That's where we move to the giving zone. And that's what we need to take our clients to, so that they move from fear to giving. They move from fear to caring. Okay. So in this zone, I'm mindful of the needs of others, particularly those in distress. So I don't just think about me, but I also think about others. I volunteer. And of course, as social workers, we are all right there on the field, not fence sitters, not in the stand watching the game. But I know that we are all out there in the field waiting to do something. I contribute to the needs of the society by making available tasks that I can contribute. For example, whether it is making masks, whether it is essential supplies, whatever that may be. I begin to follow safe hygiene practices and social physical distancing, not just for myself, but also for others. Even in times of stress, I demonstrate respect for all life, not just for me and my family. Okay, whether it's my plants, whether it is animals. So I live on the Tata Institute of Social Sciences campus, and the animals on our campus are looking so forlorn because our students are not there to take care of them. So what do? We have taken turns to take care of the animals on our campus, the plants on our campus, because we don't have people watering the plants. So can we take turns to water the plants? Can we mobilize resources? I demonstrate care for myself, for people, and the planet. Now, when I move from fear to panic, I am able to be in action. Can we take our clients through this process of moving from fear to panic? The next slide, please. I want to end my presentation with this quote. When I give myself permission to source my universal values for and oneness for action and results, I will manifest my greatness and contribute in unpredictable ways. And I am the unfolding new reality and emergence in this world. This was given by Monica Sharma in 2017. I have the next slide is a list of references. And thank you very much.
We have had an informative session on how individuals and families may be facilitated to cope with being caught up in the consequences of a pandemic situation. The worst is not over during the COVID 19. The post COVID 19 situation poses more challenges for the mental health of individuals and families. Mental health professionals, social work professionals, and students had to be equipped and ready. I am sure today's session has provided you with insights and skills to engage in this kind of work. I now request Dr. Anita Machado, Assistant Professor, College of Social Work, Nirmala Niketan, to introduce our next key speaker.
I indeed consider it an honor and privilege to introduce our key speaker, Dr. Gladstone Xavier, Associate Professor, Loyola College, Chennai. Dr. Gladstone completed both his master's degree and doctorate degree in social work in this prestigious Loyola College Institute. He also holds an MA in Conflict Transformation and Peace Building from Eastern Mennonite University in the United States of America, where he was a Fulbright Scholar from 2003 to 2004. As a passionate, dynamic, and vibrant teacher, Dr. Gladstone has more than 2 decades of academic experience, both in India and abroad, holding many prestigious positions. He has worked extensively with community-based organizations, providing training to grassroots workers and policymakers in the areas of disaster intervention, trauma awareness and recovery, art-based approaches to peace building, and restorative justice. Dr. Gladstone has carved a special niche for himself in the area of peace building and conflict resolution, and in this capacity, he has worked in many conflict areas, including Sri Lanka, Cambodia, and Afghanistan, with the purported mission of championing for the cause of the marginalized. He has also served in many important positions, to mention a few: technical advisor of an organization working for Sri Lankan Tamil refugees, chairperson Right to Health Working Group Asia Pacific Refugee Rights Network, chairperson South Asia Working Group, member of UNHCR, technical advisor of Tabish Social and Educational Organization Afghanistan, board member of SERFAC, Service and Research Institute on Family and Children, Deputy Chair, Asia Pacific Refugee Rights Network, and member of United Nations Economic and Social Council. He is also an adjunct faculty at Management Center Innsbruck, Austria. Gladstone is also acclaimed with many honors and credentials, to mention a few: Department of International Development Fellow, Refugee Studies Program, Oxford University, International Leadership Program Fellow, State Department, USA, Erasmus Fellow, Belgium, International Research Staff Exchange Scheme Scholar, UK. As an ardent academician, Dr. Gladstone has many publications to his credit. Most of his publications are on disaster mitigation, conflict resolution, and peace building initiatives. With his extensive expertise in the field of disaster mitigation and intervention, Dr. Gladstone is currently designated with the most important responsibility of coordinating the COVID-19 telecounseling centers set up by Greater Chennai Corporation in association with Loyola College. We sincerely acknowledge your kind presence, and we thank you for accepting our invitation despite your busy schedule. Dr. Gladstone will be sharing his experiences on the COVID-19 telecounseling initiatives. Over to Dr. Gladstone.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you so much for the organizers for bringing me on board. And I know this is a very challenging time of the day when most of us would be taking a siesta. And after that beautiful session by Dr. Jua, I'm going to have it completely light, and I'm also going to make it as interactive as possible, so that this is going to be an experiential sharing rather than a theoretical presentation. But then, given the background, which was beautifully laid out by Dr. Srilata Jua, I'm going to start where she left out. So the pointers are what it really matters to us. So I'm going to share a screen. I want you to look at this presentation and just follow the options. If you are on YouTube, if you're watching this on YouTube, you're more than welcome to go to that web link that I'm going to share, and then go ahead and share those options. Yeah, just give me a sec and I'm through with that. Okay. I want you to go to this slide and log on to menti.com and use the code right over there. And the code is 453426. Go to menti.com and use this code 453426 and start answering the questions. Let's see how people respond. Sometimes webinars can be quite difficult and draining, but I'm an interactive person, I'm a trainer, and I would definitely make sure that people have my attention, or you will, and I will have yours as well. Okay. I'm going to repeat that again. Yeah, it's coming on. So I can see a number of responses coming up. Please go to menti.com. I'm going to show that screen once again. Yeah, keep it coming, keep it coming. Go ahead. I see about 20 responses, 21. I'm going to share the screen once again for you, just to make sure that you have everything else lined up and you can see your work coming up here. Great. We're getting some really nice responses. Yes, it's menti.com, 4534 and 26. That's correct. Great. Now we're getting a number of responses. And now I want you to go to the next question and see if you can answer this one. What best represents social work in action in an emergency like COVID-19? I repeat, what best represents social work in action in an emergency like COVID-19? Keep your answers coming. I hope you can see these answers coming up on the screen. Good, we are getting a lot of response. As we get going with that, let me move on with my presentation. Now, rightfully, as you people said, you have very clearly indicated that social work, the multidimensionality of social work is so important and it's crucial to anything that we do here. Now, what we are also trying to do is trying to engage with multiple sectors. And a pandemic like COVID requires a multi-sectoral intervention. So what we need to do is we need to look at these intersectionalities and also look at how we can approach it as much as possible to bring everything under one roof and make sure that people are really comfortable. Now, having worked in the field of refugees for many years, our counseling technique, our mental health technique is slightly different from the traditional techniques, where when we look at a typical refugee situation, refugees do not have an opportunity to seek mental help. Now, because of that, a number of issues and concerns during protracted emergencies go unaddressed and unanswered. So in the refugee camps that we have been working for the last 20, 25 years, what we have done is the counselor goes in search of the refugee or the person who is in need of mental help. So that's something which was very different. It's like the barefoot counselor model. It's not very different. It's not rocket science. Now, when the COVID pandemic was unfolding right in front of us, what we were thinking is, what do we do as social workers, as people who are capable of something? What do we do? And first and foremost, it's a great opportunity. Every crisis is an opportunity. And secondly, this opportunity needs to be sustained. Now, a thing like COVID, we have never seen this before. So a thing like COVID is, for the first time, we are experiencing something like this. And so our approach to COVID has to be comprehensive and complete. And we have to avoid any kind of competitiveness. So how do we bring in services under one roof? And this is a testimony of how we have been doing that in Chennai. And this is how I'm going to present it and let's see how that works. Great. I'm sure all of you are able to see this. Now, the COVID-19 Telecounseling Center was established by the Greater Chennai Corporation, and it was established on the 26th of April 2020. And a day, my college principal called me and said, "Hey, why don't you just do something about it? You have been planning something with regard to mental health and you're sounding this. Why don't you do something about it?" So I said, yes, okay. And both Dr. Florina and I, we went and met with some people there in the corporation, and it was 28th and 29th. And soon we decided on 30th, it was launched. On 30th morning, we started the center. Now, the team strives to fulfill the following needs. Now, in COVID, the situation is so unique that people have medical needs, psychosocial needs, and physical needs. And these are not mutually exclusive, they're often tied to each other. Now, when we are tying these things together, there's a huge challenge because it's impossible to bring all the people who work on these areas on to come together and start intervening. So what we did was we looked at interdisciplinarity and brought in a team of experts or whoever was possible to bring at that point because we had less than 20 hours to set the whole thing up. And so we set it up and looked at some of the basic fundamental needs. Now, there were medical needs. The medical needs were emergency services, ambulance coordination, and telemedicine. Now, telemedicine has really been helpful in this situation because it's risky for doctors to go and it's easier for people to contact people over the telephone or over the internet and ask for advice. We have a long way to go, but then that's something which we thought is very important. And COVID, you can't go to a hospital by yourself. That's how it is, because you'll be infecting people on the way, and therefore it requires special transport. And then special emergency services. It could be a ventilator, it could be people who are in food needs or people suffering and things like that. There's so many emergency services. People with heart diseases or lung diseases, all kinds of diseases are there. And so there are emergency services. So these are the medical needs. Then we also had psychosocial needs, which were mostly counseling and follow-up. By counseling, we're not looking at the classic counseling, but we're also talking about people, somebody to listen to. I will tell you a lot of stories of how we have taken this forward. And also, very, very important is to follow up on people who are vulnerable and who have fallen sick or who have just been part and parcel of a long-term pandemic like this. So in this protracted situation, people need to be followed up and made sure that they are comfortable. Then there are people who have a lot of physical needs. Excuse me. And like grocery, water supply, food, and anything else. Physical needs, like there are issues and concerns where people are being evicted because of this. There are issues and concerns where the delivery man is not delivering food to them. The gas man doesn't deliver gas. So it is a highly discriminatory situation that we are here. And there's a huge stigma, which is very closely associated with psychosocial and physical needs. And also this dealing with the fear of people. There's huge fear, one of the disease, and next is coping with the disease. Now the team. This is our team, and in the photo you see our center. The team consists of medical professionals. There are 4 doctors now. We had 24 earlier. We have social workers. There are 19 coordinators and 235 home-based volunteers. Now we have about 282 now. Social workers who partner with HelpAge India, 6 coordinators and 200 social work volunteers. And then we have mental health professionals. We have 108 executives. 108 is the ambulatory service. We have public health managers, city administrative officers, and police officers. Now, this is our team. When we put this team together, we were just a bunch of 8 or 9 people. Now the team has a huge setup where we are close to 600 people who work on this singular management structure. It has evolved over time and it's work in progress. And we don't know if it can be called a model almost now, but it needs more time to prove its effectiveness. Now, what we do is something very interesting. Now, we have reached out to 277,361 people. And this is as on 30th. The data is not up to date, but this is the updated clear data. It's 277,361 calls that we have received, and it's incoming and outgoing calls both together. That's about in 90 days. So from there, I want to move towards what exactly are these calls? How are we maneuvering through these calls? Now there are incoming calls. The incoming calls itself, we have about 100,000 calls that come in. Now, people are really scared. There's this huge area of stigma because in Chennai, they put a sticker on your doorstep if you had traveled abroad and if you had come back, the sticker said that this person has traveled abroad, so this person has to be in isolation or in quarantine. But then, given the number of calls that we were receiving in this case, we managed to change the wording of the sticker, make it a little more minimal, and say that a person inside is staying inside to protect himself or herself and to protect others. So it's a quarantine sticker. That was a major concern. Then we had this huge number of general health inquiries related to fear. It may be a slight cough, it can be a hiccup, it can be slight loose motion, it can be panic. It's just panic because in Chennai, we had 5 clusters. Most of this happened as a result of 5 clusters in the beginning. And these 5 clusters had a whole range of activities that were going on within the clusters. For example, there was a mall in which a cashier was taking out money and she was in kind of interacting with the clients and customers. She turned out to be positive. And when she turned out to be positive, we placed an advertisement on the television saying that if you had visited this mall and this particular shop between these days, please call us back. Now, the entire 24 hours starting that time, we received like 20,000 calls non-stop. So these are queries out of fear and various other things. Now, people also ask us about travel because we're in lockdown, there are a lot of travel restrictions. So people asked you about travel. So we're looking at travel. And so when somebody calls us and asks us, can I get a travel pass? The person is not actually asking for a travel pass. There is much more to it. So our trained counselors explore deeply and try and find out what is the reason behind it. I'll come back to that in a minute. It's not going fast. Okay. So with that, I'm also going to go to the next part where we are talking about calls made and received. We're talking about calls made and received where the screen share has not been working properly. So I realized that. I'm going to get back to the screen share. Sometimes the screen share doesn't work very well, but I'm still going to go ahead with it and try again. The browser is blocked. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead with the presentation nevertheless. But so the number of incoming calls that we have is also in line with what we make as well. So between 15th April and 25th June alone, we have made about 81,029 calls. Now, most of these calls are to find out how they are, to follow up on their contacts, or do some contact tracing, and also to follow up on people who have been discharged, and also looking at people who have been missing or unlinked cases. Now, unlinked cases is a key area when it comes to dealing with the pandemic. Now, in this, we're talking about unlinked cases because we don't know the source of infection, where they got it from, and we don't know who they gave it to. So this unlinked case is a big challenge. The more unlinked cases happen, then we know that there is a community spread that's happening. Now in Chennai, we had about 6 zones where the pandemic was spreading, where the virus was spreading so rapidly. So what we did was we did effective contact tracing. We continue to do contact tracing. Now in contact tracing, what we do is not just call and find out Who were you in touch with? No. As social workers, the point of start or point of departure itself is by starting with some basic concerns, addressing the concerns of the people. And the concerns are, well, how are you feeling today? What's going on with your life? We know that you have received a result that's positive. Is everything okay? And where are you living now? So this is a different approach from the regular contact tracing approach. The regular contact tracing approach is you call and tell them we're calling from this place and we would like to know your contacts. We would like to classify your contacts as high risk contacts or low risk contacts and more on and so forth. So on and so forth. Now people are under tremendous pressure and tremendous stress. When people are under so much of stress and pressure, any phone call that you get can be an irritant, because the desperation to prevent the spread is so high that people go ahead and start just making calls to different kinds of people. And once you're affected by COVID, at least 15 people will call you. So some people tell us, I may not have anything because of COVID, but I'm sure I'll get something because of these phone calls. So these phone calls have been quite a bother. And also people from different kinds of backgrounds call you. The sanitary inspector calls, the malaria worker calls, the disinfection person calls you, the policeman calls you, the revenue officer calls you, and the zonal health officer calls, and there's a focus volunteer who calls, and everybody calls, and they are asking the same questions. Now, when our volunteers called, they usually in the beginning, they would get a earful because they also think that we are calling for the same. But the advantage we have is we have an interlinkage of services. Anything that is required for a person, it is made available in that area. For example, in the beginning, when we were monitoring the quarantines, we had 12,500 people who had come back from abroad. And we had to call about 5,000 people every day just to check if they're all right. Now, in those calls, it would be completely amazing to recollect that we thought that it would never be possible to work within a government machinery to make things happen, actually happened. For example, a person did not get water for 4 days. So he calls our center and says, see, we are a group of positive people. We are living here. And without bleaching, they're not able to supply water. For 4 days, we don't have water. Can you help us with that? Now, within the room, we have the city administrators, the police, and all these people who we have in the room. And believe me, within 35 minutes, water reached that person's house. Now, I can go on with hundreds of stories like this. But what we are trying to do is make sure that the comprehensiveness of this intervention is understood very well. Now, the other thing is, when people get affected, when you test positive, if you don't have symptoms, if you're asymptomatic, there's not much of a problem. But if you have problems, if there are issues and concerns that people have, then it can become very, very serious. Now, the seriousness of this issue is very multifold. So the multifold nature of the issue is that when we are trying to work with people, when we are trying to understand the issues and concerns, one key factor that keeps repeatedly coming up is stigma. Stigma related to COVID, because we have stigmatized this disease to such an extent that people started shelling inside. And shelling is something which is so serious because they don't want to talk to anybody anymore. How do you make them open up? Even if they have a problem, even if they have a serious condition, even if their SPO levels are so low, they don't want to reveal it. And this is a cause for concern. Because this was a cause for concern, we started addressing that. And we also had the CDR, that's the call data record. The police would track them down because if you're not able to find people where they are, they were making calls to all my contacts and they were trying to find out who exactly was there and how this could happen. So we were trying to bring all these things together. And later, we had face-to-face meetings with the city commissioner, with the DGP's office, and various other professionals to make sure a policy change is brought about and the police do not get involved in this entire process of dealing with the pandemic. That's just one of the changes that we are able to bring about. Now, as we go on and as we progress with this, we also try to work on a number of cases. Now, given our record, we have performed quite well because our contact tracing is quite good now. We are tracing about 15 to 20 contacts per patient, and with that we're able to prevent as well. And that's a majority of it is extended contacts. With the extended contacts, we're not just calling and saying that you have been in touch with a positive person, so you go in for testing. No, that is not the approach that we take. The approach that we take is much more subtle. We tell them that you could be at risk. There are chances that you could be at risk, and then you work through that. And then we move on to other details. So this is in a nutshell that what we have been doing in the area. Now, what we also did was, Chennai is divided into 15 zones. So we thought that one center cannot provide enough scope for everybody. And we can't take that many calls. Now what we did is the corporation established 15 zonal centers. And we provided training for people there. And it's manned by school teachers. The school teachers are the key human resource over there, and they try and work with resourcing this place. Now, another offshoot of this very interesting intervention is the HelpAge India program. Now, elderly people are peculiarly vulnerable to this pandemic because if you look at the death rates, most people who are dying are senior citizens. Though our death rates are quite low, but people who are dying are nevertheless senior citizens who are very vulnerable to this pandemic. And so what we did was we established exclusively a helpline along with HelpAge India organization. And we have about 200 volunteers working every day. We have a consolidated database of people living in Chennai who are above the age of 60. We have about 800,000 people living in Chennai, out of which 175,000 people are having some kind of comorbidity. And so what we did, we trained our counselors to talk to senior citizens, to prioritize that and start working on their needs and started reaching out to them. So till date, we have covered up to about 200,000 senior citizens. That's about in 2.5 weeks. We have then we link them. Those with comorbid conditions are linked to the health system that is already there. And then out of which we identify people with psychosocial support and connect them to our counseling center, where our counselors will call them and talk to them. On an average, we have about 25 to 30 distress calls, a number of suicide issues, a number of relationship issues, and issues related to gender, violence, and stuff like that. So we do have a whole range of things that we continue to work on. But as we try to fit in everything in the same under the same roof, what we are also increasingly finding difficult is that the challenge of not being able to provide so much in so little time. That's a big challenge. The next is getting into and breaking people's mindsets, especially after a deep-rooted stigmatization, is almost impossible. The third challenge that we continue to face is how do you break the news? How do you break the news to a person? Because you don't meet the person face to face. You're only calling. And the person on the other side is under so much pressure, and the person on this side is also under so much pressure. So what we are trying to do is we're trying to understand this in a larger situation, compile all the questions that we've received, and we have about 200 FAQs that we have compiled. And these FAQs are serving as a guide for training and for kind of replication purposes. So these are basics that we have in our center. And apart from that, I'm going to just give you a couple of stories of how effective our intervention has been. One story is the story of a green corridor. The green corridor is something that is organized for emergencies and organ transplants. During one of our contact tracing calls, the call landed to a gentleman who was really suffering, and he was on ventilator support in a private hospital. And his sibling picked up the phone and started crying. He said, "Sir, you are God sent. Can you please organize something? We've spent 7 days in this hospital and we're not able to progress because we've run out of all money. Is it possible to move us from this hospital to a government setup?" So our team, which is very well equipped, spoke to almost all the officials in the police, in the hospitals, all that, made sure there is a bed facility available for him if he's moved from one hospital to the other. And a distance of 23 kilometers was covered in 19 minutes using the green corridor. Now, this is just one of those examples of the way we were able to network and move a patient on ventilator from one place to the other, and the person is now doing very well. Then we get different kinds of calls. As I told you, when a person calls us for a pass, the person actually is not calling us because the person wants to travel. Actually, that's an excuse. The person wants to talk to somebody. Many times when we pick up the phone, we find that there is a distress in the voice. And we ask them, "How can we help you?" Then they ask us, "What can you do for us?" We ask them back the question and say, "Oh, what do you need?" Once they say what we need, then we classify that into, is it a mental health need? Is it a social need? Is it a physical need? Or is it just some kind of a random call that comes in for you to have a chat? One day, a 9-year-old girl called us and she told one of our counselors, "Auntie, these days I'm getting so angry. Whatever I feel like, whatever I see, I want to take it and break it." And she was very genuine about what she was saying. So the counselor slowly understood the situation and started working with her, jogging along with her, and then gave her some tips. And then the little child, she said, "Auntie, thank you so much. After this, I'm not going to break anything at home. I will do all these things." And then she kept the phone. So we have that. Then we have cases like elderly people who are lonely at home. The children are abroad or working somewhere else, and elders who are stuck, who are stranded in Chennai. Or sometimes we have couples, husband, newly married. The girl does not know Tamil. She's from a different state. She's stuck in an apartment. The entire apartment is empty. There's the only girl here, and there are 100 flats over there, and she cannot go out anywhere. She's stuck. So what do you do there? And then we have issues and concerns like suicides. People said that these guys, loss of livelihood. There's a guy who was selling water, and he was the only breadwinner, and he developed corona, and nobody was willing to buy water from him after that. He was completely healed. So he said, "Our entire family now is going to commit suicide." So immediately we intervened. We looked at the possibilities of helping him and did a community sensitization, ran a camp to sensitize the community, and now he's back on his feet. Now, so it's an integrated approach. Sometimes it involves the community, sometimes it involves just people and giving them conscious effort, or sometimes it's just about spreading awareness. There's an elderly gentleman who tested positive, and he was taken to the hospital, and he was living in a rented house, and I don't know what he thought. He thought his wife would also be positive and just locked her up and left. And when we called the woman, we got the contact from him and called her. She said, "I'm stuck here for the last 4 days. Luckily, I have food, but I do need stuff. I'm locked inside the house. I would need some help and support. This is where the police come. So we sent the police, broke open the lock, sent her for testing, and then she was taken care of. So we can go on with these cases and examples. But our work is more essentially, it's multi-purpose work, as you had pointed out in the graph. It's multi-purpose work. And multi-purpose work involves being available and also being present at the moment. Being present also means that we should be able to work along with whatever resources that are available then and there. Now, thanks to the openness of these departments out there, and most importantly, our colleagues from the social work fraternity. Now, when the call went out, surprisingly, the first ones to respond were our colleagues from various colleges. It was Stella Maris, it was Madras School of Social Work, DG Vaishnav College, MCC, Guru Nanak, almost every college, CTT, almost every college that had social work immediately sent their students, sent their faculty to respond to us. So the first 30 days when we were actually setting this thing up, it was social workers galore. And now we really know, and we have actually made a small chink in this entire system where social workers really mean business. Why do they want us to do the contact tracing? Why do they want us to work on counseling? Why do they want us to deal with emergencies? Why are we dealing with emergency admissions? Because we look at the need. We don't look at only the resources. And the bridging of resources has happened so seamlessly. So many of our boys and girls, we start at 8 in the morning and finish only at 9:30 at night. And we've not even closed for a single day. Every day we go there and work and make sure that we make our presence felt, and we also train others and start working towards that. So thanks to the social work fraternity that made this possible. And I'm going to stop here. I will share the slides to you, but it looks like a small technical issue over there, but we are open for questions. Thank you.
I sincerely extend my appreciation to Dr. Gladstone Xavier for the enriching and enlightening session that he has just delivered. How to operationalize telecounseling as an effective mental health intervention so as to reach out to all individuals who require this kind of support during the COVID-19 situation is now clear to us. It is now social work professionals who have to take this up at their respective professional fronts. Of the webinar.
So we will now commence the question and answer session. At the outset, I sincerely appreciate the speakers for your inspiring presentation. Honestly, the social work fraternity is truly proud of your endeavors. So once again, a warm welcome to the question and answer platform. I welcome you on behalf of my co-anchor, Dr. Smita. So can we begin the sessions? I request Smita to initiate the session, the Q&A session.
The first question is from Srilata. What is the importance of professional social work practice in the COVID-19 pandemic?
Okay. Much of what Gladstone and I have been talking about. Okay, much of what Gladstone and I have been talking about pertains to social work practice. When we say that, okay, with regard to what it means to the profession, to my mind, we can, this has implications. Our interventions during COVID-19 times has implications for practice, for research, and for teaching. Okay. However, more importantly, given that we are human service professionals, I would think that we have our role, our immediate role is in our professional services. The need of the profession, and as is the mandate of the profession, it's also important for us to respond to any pandemic or any
I think there are some audio issues.
the, the fields of practice in disaster social. Some difficulty.
Yeah, I think there are.
So when we talk about our field of practice, our fields of practice in disaster social work. Oh, how is it better now?
Yes.
Is it better now?
Yeah,
If you can repeat what you said, Dr. Srilata, if you can repeat
so
what
considering
you
the
shared.
fact that we look at, I will. So I said that given that we are human service professionals, while we have a range of responses that we can give, or our role in teaching, practice, research, and in terms of and advocacy and action with regard to our role in the pandemic, during the pandemic, our primary role is our accountability and responsibility to provide services. It is beautiful that most of our fraternity have been able to provide services either through their field action projects or through their centers or through various initiatives that they have undertaken, whether it's a small level or a big level. This work is not about big or small. This work is about being on the field and being right there and manifesting the values of the profession. So therefore, when we look at the fields of our practice, whether it's working with individuals based on the calls that Gladstone said, whether it's distributing relief, whether it is networking with the government offices and other stakeholder groups, whether it is accompanying a person to the railway station to ensure that they are put in the train and send off very with dignity. All of these are roles that we play, and we cannot, and one role is not better than the other. All of these are important. It's like our five fingers for us to function effectively, and that's the way it is.
Thank you for your response.
So this question is addressed to Dr. Gladstone. What are the standard operating procedure protocols to be followed during telecounseling with specific reference to ethical and legal protocols?
Thanks for that great question. We have standard SOPs that have been established by the WHO. We follow the two standards. WHO and IFRC have given psychosocial protocols very beautifully laid out, so we follow that. Now, some of the things that we tell people outright is tell them who you are. People have a right to know who you are, why you're calling them. Second, be transparent. And third, you should always try and understand that the person sitting on the other end is actually calling for help, and we're here to help. And asking for help can be done in many ways. Sometimes they can be asking for help by just yelling at you as well. That's sometimes very often misunderstood that way. Then the standard operating procedures are, we have 6 standard questions right in the beginning of any call. So we tell them who we are, why we are calling, what their needs are, find out their needs, and then tell them in what way we can help, be realistic, and be absolutely maintain confidentiality to the absolute extent possible. That's something which we are looking at. But then see, COVID is such a huge disaster because of this issue of confidentiality. It's a disaster because of that. And there's so much stigma related to that because people have lost jobs. People have the weddings have been stopped. People have lost lives because of some silly phone call that came to them. And people tell us, come back to us and tell us, sir, had only somebody else like you called earlier, I would not have lost my job. It's because of the phone call that somebody did. An engaged couple, a couple that was engaged, and they were going to get married despite the fact there was all this thing. And the man had contracted COVID, and somebody called the bride's family. Not only the bride, the bride's family, and somebody got to know, and they said, what happened? Your bridegroom seems to have COVID. There was a breach of confidentiality, and then the wedding had to be indefinitely postponed or stopped even. So there are a number of things that have happened like this. So in our standard operating procedures, we make sure that we are listening to people and their problems. Very interesting thing that I wanted to also share, another important case is, one day a lady calls us. She's like 80 years old or something. Her main concern is, when will they open the bank? I want to go out and put an entry on my bank passbook. For the last 60 days, I've not been able to go out and mark an entry on my passbook. Now, a genuine concern for a pensioner. She's 80 years old. She is wondering if her money is being taken out by somebody else, and that's the only money she has. And the sister kept connecting to her every 5 days. She would call me, I would talk to her, and 40 minutes of very good conversations, and then she would stop. So much so, after the lockdown, when there was a relaxation, we called her and told her, now the banks are open. If you want to go, you can go and have the entry. She was thrilled, overjoyed. We didn't follow up after that, but then she was overjoyed just to speak to us. Now, these are things that keep happening to us. The standard operating procedures are being transparent, being open about it, and also be realistic as to what you can provide and what you can't provide. That's
Thank you.
basically
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that insightful sharing. Yeah. Smita?
The second question for Srilata is, how can we work to keep up mental stability of the family, that is the adults, children, and the elderly during the COVID-19 situation? Also, what can be done to preserve the mental stability if any of the members in a family get infected with COVID-19 virus?
Is it audible?
Okay. Thank you. Remember one golden rule. I can tell. Okay, there is one golden rule that we all need to remember. That is, it's okay to feel stressed. It's okay to be worried. These are normal, being stressed, being concerned. You know, the whole stability, instability business is okay. It's okay to be worried about and concerned about our health. However, it's not okay to stay concerned and worried and paralyzed because of that worry for a long time. Okay. Now we are living in unusual situations, and this is bound to happen. How can we how can we shift our concerns from Or how can we shift our attention to the current worry, something that we can be in action about so that we allay these fears and anxieties? Uh, this whole understanding of stability professionally is itself challenged during these COVID times. So, how do we reorganize ourselves, our routines, our family functioning, our everyday tasks, so that we adjust to this new situation? How
I
do
think there is a
we
disconnection.
how do we deal with the changed situation? Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah. If you can
Can you
repeat
hear me
it,
now?
Srilata. Yeah, we missed out some
Okay. How do we
response.
Or you can continue about the follow-up question.
see how can we deal with the changed situation? Yeah, so one of the things that we need to, there are standard guidelines given by the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare about what we need to do if we have someone who's tested COVID positive. This is absolutely non-negotiable. We need to follow the norms of safe hygiene practices. We need to follow the norms of physical distance, and yet calm ourselves and deal with our lives with a hope that things will be fine. Please let's remember that being COVID positive does not mean death. However, if we have other vulnerabilities, it's important for us to do what it takes so that we are prepared. For example, whether I'm old, whether I have other comorbid conditions, I need to be careful. It's also important to allay fears of our children in the family during such times.
So we'll move on to Gladstone now. Thank you, Srilata. Thank you so much. Okay, this question is addressed to you, Gladstone. What are some of the psychological first aid that can be provided to a person expressing suicidal ideations?
Okay.
Probably you covered this, just to reiterate.
Yeah, sure. A number of things. First of all, a lot of people with suicidal ideations are, it's a spur of the moment decision. You move up to that, and then the act of suicide is a spur of the moment. It just happens like that. Now, the moment we receive a call on suicide, immediately we have our counselors or psychologists who will call immediately and be with them, talk through the issues and concerns. We also have a suicide helpline that's separate. But before that, we do call that person and make sure that person is actually comfortable, is out of those thoughts and ideas. The first stage that we look at is vent out. Ask them to vent out. Talk to them, engage with them, and say, "Sir, we heard that you're not feeling so all right. What exactly is happening, and how can we help?" Now, if there are medical reasons, then it's very simple for us to find a solution to it. If there are psychological reasons, it's slightly more complicated for us to deal with. But nevertheless, what happens is we walk with the person, and then it's about a 20-minute phone call. The first call lasts for about 20-25 minutes. And then 3 times a day, we call the person just to make sure. And we tell them that, "Sir, I will call you in the afternoon. I will also call you in the evening just to check if everything is all right." And we make a promise only when we are able to fulfill it. Let's say the person has lost his job and has nothing to eat, and they are in quarantine, and he just wants to jump off the terrace. We make sure that before we call next, we make the necessary contacts, and that relief reaches the person by the day's evening. So this is just one way in which we are able to work around it. The next psychological first aid that we work on is coping. And coping is train them to cope with it. Train them to stay engaged in the process, because this is the temporariness of this problem. In 14 days, this is going to be over, or in 28 days, this is going to be over. You need not sacrifice too much because of this. Now, this comes after we receive calls, like very strange kind of calls, saying that the facility in the hospital is not all right, I want to jump off the building. We've received calls like that, and very serious nature of calls. So immediately what we do is swing into action, make sure the nearest contact over there is reached. And then we work with a whole lot of intersectoral actors. So the best thing is to jog with their minds and talk about it and make sure they feel more comfortable before we move on to various other things. Yeah.
Thank you, Gladson. Thank you. Over to Smita. Smita, unmute yourself.
I'm sorry. The third question to Srila is, how can we work with families where there are individuals caring for persons with disabilities, for persons who are suffering from terminal illnesses and the elderly during the COVID-19 situation?
Okay. We've all heard of this case in Calcutta. A father, it was a suicide or a homicide, and I don't recall very well. But the burden of care. Sorry, but I'm using the word burden, which is not a strength's language. But the challenges of disabilities, particularly for certain disabilities, those who are in high support, who need high support, is immense for parents. Like I mentioned in the presentation, where there is a scope for some respite, that the adjustment becomes better. But when it's a 24-hour caregiving that one needs to do, and particularly for high support groups, it can be challenging. Now, this is not to say that all high support groups, caregiving for all high support groups is challenging. We also know that that for some people, particularly for elderly in the house who are all alone, caregiving can be a challenge. Taking care of themselves can be a challenge, where ranging from doing their own tasks, preparing food, to household supplies, and so on and so forth. So, and during COVID times, when you don't have help, when all of these services are not allowed, then it can become very challenging. So then, therefore, the family experience has to substitute. During such times, it is challenging for families, and that's where it's important for families to get help. It's important for others to offer help. So when I have to go and buy vegetables, I can request my neighbor to sit with my old parents, so that my parents are taken care of when in my absence, particularly when they need that kind of help. So we need to rewire ourselves. We need to find new ways of doing the same thing, while being respectful of offering help and providing for help. This is the time we need to celebrate the fact that it's beautiful to offer help from others, and the connection can only be strengthened and fostered. And when we do that, and when we share the load, then it becomes far more easier. The other challenge that we also need to do is where women provide all the care and men are let off the hook.
Yeah, we'll give some time for Srilata to settle in. I think there are some audio issues.
Because of the rain.
Yeah.
So, can we not
It's
have
also pretty
others pitch in, irrespective of gender norms? Can we have
Srilata, I'm
others pitch
sorry.
in?
I think there were some
Can we have
technical
others pitch in
issues.
with
Sorry to
household
interrupt.
tasks so
Hello?
that we
Yeah.
can help?
If you can repeat it, there was some lag in the sound. If you can repeat,
Yes, go on.
The
sorry.
last one sentence. Pitch in.
I will. I said this is the time. This is the time for us to challenge gender norms, to challenge unworkable norms, so that we get help from people in the family, whether men or women. And men can do the same work that women can do, and like women can do the same work that men can do. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Srilata. This question is to Dr. Gladstone. What are some of the risks and challenges confronted during telepsychotherapy, especially in a pandemic situation when access to in-person psychotherapy session is limited? Probably we don't get into psychotherapy, but basically what are some of the challenges confronted? Because one of the participants shared an experience of a misdiagnosis. So what are some of the challenges in this you have confronted during the intervention process?
During the intervention process, most of our, if there is a need for psychotherapy, we have a good set of psychotherapists who are as part of our network. So we refer to them. And then have them to continue and follow up with that. The challenge is you can't meet in person. And when you can't meet in person or a Skype meeting or a Zoom call, it's almost impossible to get everybody connected, and it just doesn't work very well. So that's the biggest challenge. We don't have enough technology right now to do therapy sessions online. But however, what we do is once you start connecting with people over the telephone, then you have people fill up these forms, and then a diagnosis can be made. But we do not recommend that. We're not recommending it because hopefully all that we are doing right now is quite temporary. We tell them that, and then they have to see a therapist in person in the next possible opportunity. That's how we try and work on it. But nevertheless, the other issue over here is there is a lot of fear. There's a lot of fear, and among the psychologists and psychotherapists itself, because the moment you're trying to come in touch with somebody, it's going to be difficult. So we have a very good network from the Institute of Mental Health. We work with the district doctors. In case there is a need immediately in terms of psychotropic drugs or psychopharmacological requirements, immediately the drugs are actually supplied to them. The district medical officer makes sure that these drugs and facilities are given. But apart from that, in terms of psychotherapy and other things, we are very limited.
Thank you, Gladstone. Smita? Smita, you have to unmute yourself.
The fourth and final question to Srilata is, how can we work with families which have persons engaging in substance abuse or domestic violence during the COVID-19 situation?
Okay. At this point, the focus would be to provide crisis intervention. Why does such behavior occur? It's because we don't know other ways of dealing with the situation. So can we help foster coping and resilience so that we find other ways of dealing with the stress related to the pandemic? One. So this is in situations where substance abuse and violence has just surfaced. But in situations where there has been a long-standing abuse and violence, the interventions would be different. So we don't have a one-size-fits-all cookie-cutter answer or response to such interventions. We need to tailor-make it to, we need to consider various factors and tailor-make it to the need that arises. However, this for those who have been in substance abuse for a long time, This is the time for a virtual AA session, virtual support group session, whether it's the person who's abusing or whether it's a survivor of the abuse. It's important for us to be in touch with help support services so that we are able to deal with the micro events that actually can trigger of abuse. So this is what I would like to say. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay.
Thank
This
you.
question is for Gladstone. What are some of the prospective strategies to ensure counseling services are more inclusive? How do we ensure that services reach persons with disability with specific reference to hearing impairment? How do we reach out to the most vulnerable groups who do not have access to telephones? Probably?
Yeah, that's a very, very important question. See, the thing is, being inclusive or exclusive has to be mainstreamed, first of all. Over a telephone, it's really disabling and disempowering for a person who has difficulties. But, however, one way that we try to work around it is using smartphones. And lip reading and sign language are becoming more and more common using smartphones. But I must confess, we have not tried it. We have not tried it. But if there's one sector that has been constantly ignored and also been made so vulnerable, it is the disability sector, especially with this. Because if you're talking about social distancing, how do you maintain a social distance with a person if you're a caregiver? Now, there is a caregiver, there's a person with disability who has been diagnosed with COVID, and the person has to go to a hospital. The person is only 18 years old, 18-year-old female. The caregiver is the mother. The mother is tested negative. Now, this 18-year-old young woman cannot go to the hospital by herself and can't go relieve herself over there, because you know how these COVID care hospitals are. It's impossible. So we make sure that there's some special allowance made for her, giving the mom a PPE, or the mom is okay becoming positive also. But then if the mother becomes positive, who will take care of the child? So there are several dilemmas like this. Then the issues of people with visual impairments. Now, with visual impairment, you need a person to live with them and take care of them 24/7. They cannot be home isolated by themselves because there's nobody to take care of them, and there are issues and concerns like that. Now, like that, and children with mental retardation, that's something a huge problem. Children with mental retardation, and sometimes they have to be separated in these centers, and then you have to have a caregiver, a parent who's a primary caregiver who needs to accompany when the parent is negative, or when the parent turns positive and the children are negative. How do you leave them and go to a center? Now, these are questions that we have not found answers to. Temporary quick fixes have been made. We have been able to work through these things, but in a majority of cases, there's no policy as such. It's a case-by-case basis that we approach it. That's how it goes on.
Thank you so much, Gladstone. In fact, we have to introspect and see how inclusive our webinars are, because we do have, so it's a true introspection. And in fact, I take this moment to also extend our apologies because we do not have a visual transcript coming on. So we are aware of it and we apologize. I thought this will be the right juncture to also say that we will ensure that we will send a visual transcription. So thank you, Gladstone, for that wonderful question. I have this question which is addressed to both the panelists. Yeah, feel free to respond. A case scenario: a person visits his country from abroad to look after his parents who are in a critical condition. Nobody is there to look after them. Under restrictive protocols, he's under quarantine. He wants to breach the quarantine to see his parents. As a counselor or a telecounselor, how can you empathetically deal with this person?
Okay, shall I go with that, Srilata? Because we have a number of cases like that. We are also monitoring
Yes,
quarantines. I'm very familiar with the situation here. Now, see, there are two things. The protocol is that the moment you arrive in the country, in the airport, you are tested, you give a sample, then 7 days you have to be in quarantine, and then you can, after 7 days, you're tested again, then you can leave if you're negative. If you're positive, that's a different story. Now, exact scenario like this actually happened just a few days ago. Now, what we try and do at this situation is we apply for an emergency pass, an emergency, and get a self declaration and make sure there is a social distance that is maintained among these people. And in India, one thing that is very, very good over here is we can bend the rules if you know people. So what we do is not using our personal influence that much, but we flag this issue to the highest authority possible because the quarantine manager is closely linked to a center. So we tell them saying that, look, this person is here to take care of the 90-year-old person who is ailing and who does not have anybody to take care. The only purpose of visit is this. The first test is negative. The second test is we don't know as yet, they've not taken the test. Now, on a personal risk, can you let them go? Well, the social distancing norms or physical distancing norms need to be followed. We walk them through that, get a commitment, and make sure they reach the spot on time. Now, this has happened in more than 10 cases that we have actually worked on. Now, in some cases, the genuinity of the case needs to be examined also. Not all cases are as serious as they appear. So the genuinity check is done first, and then we also send a person directly to the spot to verify if what the person is claiming is the truth or not. This person happened to be in another town altogether. So we actually had that collector office verify, and once they checked, we facilitated the travel. So that's something which we did. See, this is what social workers need to do, or are good at. That's what we are good at, because we know what the needs are and we are able to work through the cracks. It's not about just formalities, systems, and structures. We, as most of us know, that it is important to stick to the rules. But then what happens if that person dies in the next 2 days? Will we be able to take that responsibility? So we go that extra mile. And that extra mile is so important for all of us.
Thank you. Srilata, would you like to add your opinion?
While I agree with Gladstone about the fact that we need to go the extra mile with keeping in mind all the norms that we need to follow. Also, we need to remember that people don't lose relationships just because they're tested COVID positive or negative. Life continues to go on whether we are positive or COVID positive or COVID negative. And therefore, I wish there was a cookie cutter answer to say yes or no. Life is not that simple. Life is not that straight. We really need to go case by case basis. So if you ask if there's an answer to this, we really don't have an answer. There has to be a context within which we can answer this question. A hypothetical question like this is rather hard for me to answer.
Yeah, well taken.
Yeah, I'm done. Thank you.
Yeah. So I think we're running short of time. So can we wind up the Q&A sessions? Any questions from the chat, Smita? I think
Yes,
most of the questions are.
Yes. I have been scrolling through the chat, and constantly there are some questions that are coming in which are relevant for both Srilata and Gladstone. Questions such as if the family is losing, the earning member is losing a job, or there is an adolescent child or children of any age group, they are losing their academic year. There are financial issues that the families are facing because there is no money, they are not able to withdraw the money, they have lost the jobs. Or if there are family members whose mental illness, if they are diagnosed with mental illness, if there is exacerbation to the stress that they are facing. And if there are individuals in long distance relationships, there is the stress and burden of that. So these are different kinds of scenarios that individuals and families are facing during COVID-19 situation that they are grappling with. So, as resource person today, can you suggest what can be done in these situations at a general level?
Uh,
I
Mr.
I
would
would
Douglas,
like
like
to
to respond. Srilekha can respond.
okay. With regard, yeah, with regard to mental illness, exacerbation, and so on, I think it's most important to reach out to a health professional, seek the support. In fact, have very clear important for us to for help, and whether it's medication, whether it's counseling or psychotherapy. So these kind of interventions need to continue. However, with regard to interventions that require, say, physical therapy being offered online. So the beauty is human minds are so creative that we find ways of dealing with problems like this. With regard to
absolutely.
loss of jobs, they are very serious. I know that it's ridiculous to say that find another job or do something different, but again we need to help the family through this crisis of job loss, to see how financial planning can be supported, to see how particularly people who have loans and stuff like that, how can they be supported. We need to find ways of augmenting income from other sources if possible, and really there's no answer. Even the government doesn't have an answer to loss of jobs. So uh, I mean, this is all I can say on a general level.
Well, the, the challenges of COVID will continue beyond COVID. In fact, there is not going to be a scenario called post COVID. It is COVID situation. Let's try and imagine that. It is COVID situation. Post COVID situation is a far imagination. Okay, it's going to be here. It's going to stay for some time. Now, in that protracted emergencies, one has to be prepared as to how to deal with these emerging crises, how it unfolds. So at the individual level, at the personal level, and social level, and all the other levels, you can come up with strategies, but ultimately it is on a case by case basis. And what is very important is in crises like this, there are always new issues that emerge. There are new opportunities that emerge. So people need to tap into those opportunities. And for us as social workers, it is important to identify those opportunities and channelize it to people who need it. Now, these opportunities may not be going back to pre-COVID times. It could be a completely new thing. And that's what it has done to most parts of the world. And what it does to us is the new reality needs to be reinforced and we need to adapt. And that's how we have survived. This adaptation is what has made us survive so far. We've come this far. And so this adaptation will take some time, but people will bounce back. The next is, most importantly, is to give them access to networks that they can help. Access to networks that can actually open up job opportunities or livelihood or issues and concerns like that. You should be able to network. Now, these networks can bring about a huge difference in people's lives. Okay, so that's something which is just one addition to what was already shared. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So I think we are running short of time, so we will come to a formal closure of the question and answer session. Thank you, dear speakers. Thank you, Smita, for your insightful sharing and enriching discussions that we had. So we will move on to Smita. Thank you so much.
Thank you. The question answer session is a vital part of the webinar for the participants who have joined today. I extend my thanks to Dr. Anita Machado for presiding over the question answer session along with me, and to the esteemed speakers for patiently resolving the queries that have been asked. I now request Dr. Anita Machado to extend the vote of thanks and bring the webinar to a formal and successful close.
The COVID-19 pandemic has caused a humanitarian crisis with the unprecedented health crisis. Many unheard stories of suffering, hardships, resilience, and bravery have become the face of the pandemic. The emerging concern is to brace and be prepared for the coming wave of the shadow pandemic as cases of domestic violence and intimate partner violence has been increasing. Pandemic-related suicides and mental health problems have also been reported in many of the hardest hit countries. The need of the hour is not to sensationalize mental health concerns, but to strategize with concerted efforts. Social workers have an essential frontline role to play by ensuring widespread availability of mental health services in collaboration with government and non-governmental organizations. We need to strongly advocate for including mental health care services as part of the general pandemic health care. The presentation by the key speakers and the discussions have clearly highlighted how social work professionals and students can facilitate interventions to encourage positive mental health among individuals, families, and communities. This webinar is a modest attempt to bring to focus on factors that are leading to mental health concerns among individuals and families, and to enlighten on how telecounseling has emerged as an important mental health intervention to reach out to those affected by the pandemic. Our key speakers, Dr. Srilata and Dr. Gladstone, have clearly highlighted these issues. On behalf of the management, our principal, Dr. Librin Dias, our administrator, Sister Sabina, and the webinar co-organizer, Dr. Smita, I take this opportunity to express my sincere gratitude to all who have supported us for this webinar. Our sincere appreciations to our key speakers, Dr. Srilata and Dr. Gladstone, for their enriching insights and excellent presentation. The social work fraternity is truly proud of your dedicated and committed efforts. We understand and we acknowledge that you have taken time out of your busy schedule to contribute to this webinar. We thank you for your invaluable contribution. We are also grateful to all those who have been involved in the organization of this event, both in the foreground and background. Our sincere thanks to Dr. Libin Dias and Sister Sabina for your kind support and guidance. Sincere acknowledgement to Dr. Smita for conceptualizing this webinar and for initiating this process. We sincerely acknowledge the support extended by the technical team for ensuring a seamless presentation. It was truly a humbling experience working with the IT team who educated and assisted us with the nuances of utilizing technology. I would like to express my sincere appreciations to all the participants representing different academic institutions, mental health professionals, and representatives from NGOs for your kind participation. We truly acknowledge your presence. My sincere thanks to all our students who have attended this webinar and for raising relevant queries. Thank you once again. We now officially announce the closure of this webinar. Stay safe, stay healthy, and stay resilient. I request you all to kindly rise for the national anthem. Thank you.
जनगण मन अधिनायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता। पंजाब सिंध गुजरात मराठा द्राविड उत्कल बंगा। विंध्य हिमाचल यमुना गंगा उच्चल जलधि तरंगा। तव शुभ नामे जागे, तव शुभ आशीष मांगे। गाहे तव जय गाथा, जन गण मंगलदायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता। जय हे जय हे जय हे जय 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 हे।